I knew my marriage was already over the moment my wife looked at me from the bedroom doorway and asked, way too calmly, "Why are you home early?" There was no warmth in it, no confusion, just this cold, measured pause, like I had walked into the middle of something I wasn't supposed to see, and she was already picking which lie would hurt me the least. I stood there holding a bag of groceries and flowers like an idiot, still in my work jacket, still thinking I was a husband coming home to his wife. And in those 2 seconds, it felt like that version of my life just peeled off me and hit the floor. I even forced a laugh because I could feel how wrong it was, and I wanted to kill it before it grew into something real. And I said, "Power outage downtown. Boss sent us home. Figured I'd surprise you." But she didn't smile, didn't soften. She just stared at the flowers like they were evidence of something and quietly said, "You should have texted." And I swear to God, before I even took my boots off, I felt like I was standing in someone else's house pretending to belong there. We had been together 12 years, married for 9, and I used to believe that meant something, like I knew her. Like even when things got bad, I could still read her. But lately it felt like she had rewritten herself while I wasn't looking. She had started guarding her phone in that casual, practiced way that makes you feel insane for noticing it, flipping it face down when I walked in, taking it everywhere, smiling at the screen and then acting irritated for the rest of the night. And every time I asked what was wrong, she had an answer so fast it made me feel stupid for even opening my mouth. "You're imagining things. I'm stressed. Not everything is about you." And she never raised her voice. Not at first. She stayed calm while I got emotional until suddenly the conversation wasn't about her behavior anymore. It was about my tone, my insecurity, my trust issues. And I found myself apologizing for questions I should have been asking louder. That afternoon, she told me she was heading out in an hour to help her cousin Melissa with a work thing, which made no sense because Melissa sold handmade candles online and somehow always needed help at night. Dressed like she was going somewhere expensive, full makeup, perfume I hadn't smelled in months. And when I asked why she looked like that for family, she actually laughed at me. Not nervous, not defensive, just amused, like I had embarrassed myself, and said, "You really hear yourself, right?" before kissing my cheek like I was a child and brushing past me. And that's when I saw her phone light up on the counter for half a second, just enough to destroy everything. The message preview wasn't even subtle. "Don't let him ruin this again. 8 p.m., same place." No name, just a heart and a thread. She had tried to delete but didn't finish. My chest went hollow. I picked up the phone, and my hands started shaking so badly I could barely hold it. The password was changed. Her birthday didn't work. Mine didn't. Our anniversary didn't. Even our son's birthday didn't. It was like every piece of our life had been locked out of her world. When she came back, she didn't panic when she saw the phone in my hand. She didn't even look surprised. She just looked irritated, like I had crossed a line she had already decided didn't belong to me anymore. And she walked up slowly and said, almost bored, "Put that down." I knew my marriage was over 10 seconds before my wife walked into the kitchen. And the worst part is that she was the one who smiled first. It was 6:14 in the morning, still dark outside, and her phone was lighting up on the counter while she was upstairs in the shower, buzzing so hard it kept rattling against the granite like it was trying to jump into my hand. I was not even trying to snoop. I had only come down to make coffee before work, half asleep, still thinking about a meeting I had that morning. And then the screen lit up again with a message preview that said, "You left your earring in my truck. Want me to keep it or should your husband find it first?" I remember staring at that sentence so long my coffee machine started beeping at me like it was angry I had forgotten it existed. And I honestly think something inside me shifted right there. Something deep and ugly and permanent. Because normal life does not survive a text like that. My wife Lena and I had been married 11 years, together for 14. And until that moment, I would have told anybody we were tired, stressed, maybe drifting a little, but still solid. We had a house, a shared checking account, a calendar full of school events and family birthdays, all the boring, ordinary things people mistake for safety. The cracks had been there, I can admit that now. She had gotten secretive in small ways first, the kind you talk yourself out of noticing because the alternative is too humiliating to say out loud. She started taking her phone into the bathroom, turning it face down at dinner, stepping outside to answer calls, and then coming back in smiling too hard, too fast, like she had rehearsed it. Every time I asked, she had an answer ready. "You are being paranoid." "It is work." "You always do this when I finally have a life outside this house." She said those things with this calm, wounded voice that made me feel like I was the one damaging us, like I was some suspicious, needy man inventing problems because I could not handle a strong wife. And I believed her enough to hate myself for asking. So when she came downstairs in that gray robe, hair damp, smelling like my soap, and saw me standing there with her phone in my hand, she did not look scared at first. She looked annoyed, like I had touched paperwork on her desk. She stopped on the last step and said, "Why are you going through my phone?" with this cold little frown. And I actually laughed because it was so insane I could not do anything else. I held the screen up and said, "Who leaves earrings in his truck, Lena?" And I watched her face change in stages. First denial, then calculation, then anger, and that anger came way too fast for an innocent person. She marched over, snatched for the phone, and said, "You do not get to ambush me before sunrise over some joke." And I pulled it back and said, "A joke from who?" She crossed her arms, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "From Evan. He is messing with you because he thinks you are controlling." Evan. My friend Evan. The man who had been in my garage 2 weekends ago drinking my beer and asking me how married life was holding up. The man who hugged my wife at our barbecue like he belonged there. I wish I could say I exploded. But the truth is I went cold. That scared her more than yelling would have. I asked her very quietly why my friend had her earring, and she gave me the most hateful look I have ever seen in my life and said, "Maybe because he listens when I talk. Maybe because he does not make me feel trapped every time I breathe." It was cruel, practiced, almost relieved, like she had been waiting to hurt me with something sharp enough to leave a mark. Then she reached for the phone again, but another message came in before she could lock it, and this one was worse. It said, "Did he see the photo from the lake house? Or do I need to tell him about Saturday myself?" I looked up at her, and she went pale so fast it was like the blood had drained out of her all at once. Saturday was the day she told me she was with her sister. Saturday was the day I helped Evan move a couch into his new place, because he said he had no one else. That was the moment I heard a car door outside, then slow footsteps on our front porch, and before either of us could move, somebody knocked 3 times on my front door like they had every right in the world to be there. The second that knock hit the door, Lena grabbed my wrist so hard her nails dug into my skin, and in this low, panicked voice that barely sounded like her, she said, "Do not open that." That was the first honest reaction she had given me all morning, and somehow it was worse than the texts, worse than her excuses, worse than hearing Evan's name come out of her mouth like it belonged next to hers, because fear is hard to fake when it arrives that fast. I looked at her and said, "Why is he here?" And she shook her head immediately, too quickly, and said, "I do not know who that is," which was such a stupid lie in that exact moment that I felt this sick heat rise up the back of my neck. The knocking came again, slower this time, almost patient, and whoever it was tried the handle like maybe they expected it to be unlocked. Lena's face drained even more, and she whispered, "Please." But she did not say, "Please do not make a scene," or "Please let me explain." She just said please like the rest of the sentence was too ugly to survive out loud. I pulled my arm away and went to the door with her right behind me, and I could feel her unraveling with every step. When I opened it, it was not Evan standing there. It was my sister, Rachel, still wearing her scrubs, eyes red, breathing hard like she had driven too fast to get there. For one insane second, I actually felt relief. But then I saw the way she looked past me straight at Lena. Not confused, not surprised, just furious. And that relief turned into something heavier. Rachel held up her phone and said, "Tell me she is going to tell you before I do." Lena actually flinched. I said, "Tell me what?" And Rachel stepped inside without waiting, shut the door behind her, and looked at me the way people look at somebody they know is about to get hit by a train, but cannot move them off the tracks in time. "I did not know how to call you with this," she said. "I found out last night. I prayed I was wrong." "I am not wrong," Lena snapped before Rachel could finish. She lunged forward and said, "You need to leave my house right now." And Rachel laughed right in her face, this short, bitter laugh I had never heard from her before. "Your house," she said. "That is bold, considering whose number I found in your messages." I felt my stomach drop so hard I had to put a hand on the counter. Rachel turned her screen toward me, but Lena moved first, trying to grab it, and the two of them collided in the middle of my kitchen like strangers in a bar fight. I shouted for them to stop, and Rachel pulled back, breathing hard, then looked at me and said, "I was at Mom's last night helping her with her medication. Her iPad was synced to Dad's messages again because he never fixes anything." A thread popped up from Lena. I remember actually saying, "No," before she even showed me, because some part of me knew exactly what I was about to see and refused it on instinct. There were only a few lines visible before my vision started narrowing, but it was enough. My wife had been texting my father. Not by accident, not about family plans, not anything innocent enough to hide behind. I saw, he still trusts both of us. And, lower down, "Saturday has to stay between us." My hands started shaking so badly Rachel had to steady the phone for me, and all I could hear was Lena saying, "That is not what it looks like. That is not what you think. Your father was helping me." Over and over, louder every time, until it stopped sounding defensive and started sounding rehearsed. Then my own phone buzzed in my pocket, and when I pulled it out, it was a message from Evan that read, "Do not believe a word she says about your dad." She used the same lie on me. I stared at that message from Evan like it was written in a language I almost understood, but not quite. Like if I blinked too hard, it would rearrange itself into something less devastating. My father. That word did not fit anywhere in the version of reality I had been living in, and yet there it was, sitting between my wife and my friend like some kind of sick bridge connecting everything I thought I knew. I looked up slowly, first at Rachel, whose face was tight with anger and something like pity, and then at Lena, who had gone very still, her eyes moving between us like she was trying to calculate which lie would survive the longest. I asked her quietly, "Why is my dad texting you like that?" And she shook her head again, softer this time, like she was switching tactics. "He reached out to me," she said. "He was worried about you. He said you have been distant, that you have been shutting people out." I did not want to tell you because I knew you would react exactly like this. It was smooth, almost convincing. The kind of explanation that wraps itself around your insecurity and squeezes until you doubt your own instincts. But then Rachel cut in, sharp and precise. "Do not do that," she said. "Do not turn this into concern. I saw the whole thread." Lena's composure cracked for half a second, just long enough for me to see the panic underneath, and that was all it took for something inside me to snap into focus. I turned my phone back to the message from Evan and typed with hands that did not feel like mine, asking him what he meant, asking him what lie, asking him how long this had been going on. The three dots appeared almost instantly, like he had been waiting for me to ask, like he knew this moment was coming. While I waited, Lena stepped closer to me, her voice dropping into something softer, almost pleading now. "You are letting them poison you," she said. "Your sister has always hated me, and Evan is trying to save himself. You are the only one I have been honest with." I looked at her and felt this deep, hollow disbelief, because honesty should not feel like something you have to argue into existence. My phone buzzed again, and this time it was not just one message. It was a flood. Screenshots, dates, fragments of conversations that overlapped and contradicted everything she was saying in real time. I saw my name in those messages like it was being passed around, discussed, managed. "He suspects something. Just tell him he is overthinking again." Saturday worked. He bought it. My chest tightened so hard I had to lean back against the counter, and I could feel Rachel's hand on my shoulder, steady but tense, like she was bracing me for impact. I looked up at Lena, and she saw it in my face before I said anything. The softness vanished instantly. Her eyes hardened, and she said, "You are really going to believe him over me?" There was no sadness in it now, no fear, just anger and something colder, something almost resentful, like I had failed a test she expected me to pass. I opened one of the screenshots fully, and that was when everything tilted again. It was a conversation between Lena and Evan from weeks ago, and buried in it was a line that made my stomach drop even further than I thought possible. "He still thinks you are the only one," she had written. I felt the room go quiet around me, like all the sound had been pulled out at once. I looked at her and asked, my voice barely holding together, "The only one what?" She did not answer right away. She just stared at me, and for the first time since this started, she looked unsure. Then my phone buzzed again with one final message from Evan, and it said, "You should probably sit down before you ask her about your boss." When I read that message about my boss, it felt like the floor under me shifted just enough to throw off my balance. Not a collapse, not yet. Just that subtle, sickening tilt that tells you something much worse is coming. I did not sit down. I could not. I just stood there staring at Lena like I was trying to recognize a face I had lived with for over a decade and suddenly could not place. "My boss?" I said, and even to my own ears my voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else standing in the room. She let out this slow breath, and for a moment I saw something almost like exhaustion cross her face, as if the weight of holding everything together was finally catching up to her. But it passed quickly, replaced again by that defensive edge I was starting to understand was her default when cornered. "He is twisting things," she said, nodding toward my phone like Evan himself was physically present. "You are letting him drag other people into this to make it messier than it is." Rachel stepped forward before I could respond, her voice cutting through the tension. "It is already messy," she said. "You just do not want him to see how far it goes." Lena turned on her immediately, and the shift was sharp, almost violent in tone. "You have always wanted to tear me down," she snapped. "Ever since the day he chose me, you have been waiting for something like this." I felt that hit me in a strange way, because it was so clearly an attempt to redirect, to fracture the room into sides, to make this about old resentment instead of what was sitting right in front of us. I raised my hand slightly, not even to silence them, just to ground myself, and said, "Stop, both of you." My eyes stayed on Lena. "What does my boss have to do with you?" She hesitated again, and that hesitation said more than anything she had admitted so far. It was small, just a fraction of a second too long, but after everything I had just seen, it might as well have been a confession. "He helped me," she said finally, "with work stuff, networking. You know how things have been for me lately." I almost laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it at all. "Networking?" I repeated. "Is that what we are calling Saturday now?" Her jaw tightened, and I could see the anger building again. But underneath it, there was something else. Something I had not seen clearly until now. Not guilt, not exactly. It was more like frustration that I was not staying in the version of reality she kept offering me. My phone buzzed again, and this time it was not Evan. It was my boss himself. Just his name lighting up my screen in the middle of all this chaos, like he had perfect timing or terrible luck. I could not tell which. I stared at it for a second too long, and Lena saw it. I watched the color drain from her face in a way that was different from before, sharper, more immediate, like this was the one variable she could not control. "Do not answer that," she said quickly, stepping toward me again. "Please, just let me explain first." I looked at her, really looked this time, at the fear, at the urgency, at the cracks finally spreading too wide to hide, and something inside me hardened in response. I answered the call. I did not even say hello before his voice came through tense and low, like he already knew he was stepping into something complicated. "Michael," he said, "we need to talk about Lena before this gets out of hand." I felt every muscle in my body lock up at once, and across from me, Lena closed her eyes like she had just heard the final piece fall into place. I swallowed hard and said, "I think we are already past that," and there was a brief silence on the line before he replied, "Then you should know she is not telling you everything about why she has been coming to my office after hours." His words hung there, heavy and deliberate, like he had been waiting for the exact moment to say them, and I could feel Lena watching me, not breathing, not moving, just waiting to see which direction I would break. "After hours," I repeated, and even as I said it, pieces started sliding into place in my head. All those late meetings she swore were mandatory. All the nights she came home just a little too polished for someone who had been sitting in an office all evening. He exhaled slowly on the other end of the line and said, "I did not realize she had not told you the full context," which was such a careful, calculated sentence that it made my skin crawl. I glanced at Lena, and she shook her head almost imperceptibly, like she was trying to communicate something silently, like there was still a version of this she could contain if I just played along. "Then tell me now," I said, my voice tightening despite everything I was trying to hold together. There was a pause, and I could almost hear him choosing his words, weighing what to reveal and what to protect. "She came to me a few weeks ago," he began, saying she was overwhelmed, that things at home were unstable. She said she needed guidance, someone to talk to privately. I felt something twist in my chest at the way he said unstable, like my entire marriage had been reduced to a convenient narrative she could hand out to whoever she needed. "And?" I pushed. He hesitated again, then said, "And it became more frequent than I was comfortable with. Personal. I told her it was inappropriate. I told her it needed to stop." Lena let out a sharp breath at that, stepping closer, her voice suddenly urgent again. "He is lying by omission," she said, her eyes locked on mine. "He is making it sound like something it was not." I held up a hand without looking at her, needing to hear this through to the end. "Why would he do that?" I asked her quietly. "Why would everyone be lying except you?" That hit her. I saw it land. Her expression hardened again, but there was something more brittle underneath it now. "Because you are easier to control than you think," she shot back. "Because they know exactly how to push you." On the phone, my boss cleared his throat softly, like he was trying to navigate around a situation that had already exploded beyond his control. "Michael," he said, more firmly now, "there is something else you should know, and I would rather you hear it directly than piece it together from fragments." My grip tightened on the phone. "Just say it." Another pause, longer this time, and then he said, "The night you think she was with her sister, she was not at the office. She used my name as a cover. I did not know until afterward." The room went completely still. I slowly turned my head toward Lena, and this time she did not try to interrupt, did not try to redirect, did not try to soften it. She just stood there, staring at me, her eyes searching my face like she was trying to measure how much damage had finally reached the surface. "So where were you?" I asked, and my voice came out lower than I expected, almost calm, which felt more dangerous than any anger I had felt so far. She did not answer right away. Instead, she looked at Rachel, then at my phone, then back at me, and there was this brief, terrible moment where I could see her deciding which truth would hurt me the most. And then she said, very quietly, "You are asking the wrong question." Right as my phone buzzed again, this time with a message from a number I did not recognize that read, "If she has not told you about the lake house yet, you need to leave before she does." That message sat on my screen like a warning I was already too late to understand, and I could feel my pulse in my throat as I read it again. Slower this time, like maybe the words would rearrange into something less final. "Leave before she does." Before she does what? Before she tells me the truth, or before she changes it into something I can survive. I looked up at Lena, and she was watching me read it, her eyes locked onto mine with this strange mix of fear and defiance, like she knew the window to control this was closing and she was deciding whether to slam it shut or jump through it. "Who is that?" I asked, holding up the phone. My voice was steady, but it felt like it was coming from a place far away from where I was actually standing. She shook her head slowly. "I do not know," she said, but there was hesitation again. That same split-second delay that had started to mean everything. "You do," I replied, and this time I stepped closer to her. Not aggressive, just deliberate, like I was done letting distance soften anything. "You know exactly who that is, and you know exactly what they are talking about." Rachel shifted behind me, her presence grounding but tense, like she was ready for this to get worse, and I realized I was too. That was the part that scared me the most. Not the lies, not the names, not even the betrayal stacking up layer by layer, but the fact that I was starting to expect it, like my mind was already bracing for the next blow before it landed. "The lake house," I said, slower now. "What happened there?" Lena closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them, something had changed. The softness was gone. The defensiveness was gone. What replaced it was colder, more resolved, like she had reached the point where pretending was more exhausting than the truth. "You are not ready for that answer," she said quietly. I let out a hollow breath, something between a laugh and disbelief. "You do not get to decide what I'm ready for anymore." My phone buzzed again in my hand, and I glanced down without thinking. Another message from the same unknown number. This one longer. "He thinks you only know about Evan. He does not know about your dad being there. He definitely does not know who else showed up later." My stomach dropped so hard it felt like it pulled everything else down with it. I read it twice, then a third time, each pass making it worse, more real, more impossible to ignore. I looked back up at Lena, and this time I did not ask gently. "Who else was there?" I said, and I could hear the edge in my voice now, the anger finally breaking through the shock. "Who else was at the lake house with you, with Evan, with my father?" Saying those words out loud felt unreal, like I was describing someone else's nightmare, not my own life. She stared at me, and for a moment I thought she might finally break, that the weight of everything would force something honest out of her. Instead, she took a slow breath and said something that made everything twist even further. "If I tell you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you are going to look at someone you trust every single day and realize you never knew them at all." Rachel's hand tightened on my shoulder behind me, and I could feel her tension spike instantly, like she already had a terrible idea of where this was going. I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry, and forced the question out anyway. "Try me." Lena's lips parted slightly, her eyes flickering between me and something behind me for just a fraction of a second, and that was when I heard it. Another knock at the door, this time slower, heavier, and somehow worse than the first. That second knock did not sound like someone asking to come in. It sounded like someone who already knew they belonged there, like the door was just a formality. Every instinct in my body told me not to move, not to open it, not to let whatever was on the other side step any further into what was left of my life. But I was already past the point of protecting anything. I turned slowly, feeling Rachel's hand slip off my shoulder as I stepped forward, and behind me, I heard Lena say my name. Not sharp this time, not controlling, but strained, almost warning me. "Michael, do not," she said, and that was exactly why I reached for the handle. When I opened the door, the first thing I noticed was how calm he looked. That was what hit me before anything else. Not guilt, not panic, not even hesitation. Just calm. It took my brain a second to catch up, to recognize the face standing there on my porch like this was a normal visit, like we were about to talk about work or weekend plans. Daniel. My neighbor. The man who had borrowed my tools more times than I could count, who waved at me every morning, who had stood in my kitchen just last month laughing with Lena about some stupid show they both watched. He gave me a small, almost polite nod and said, "We should talk," like this was inconvenient timing, not devastation. I felt something inside me drop into a place I did not recognize. "You were at the lake house," I said, and it was not even a question. His expression flickered then, just briefly, enough to confirm it without him saying a word. Behind me, I heard Rachel suck in a sharp breath, and somewhere to my left Lena moved, but I did not look at her. I could not. If I looked away from him, I thought I might lose whatever fragile grip I still had on this moment. Daniel exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck like he was preparing for an uncomfortable conversation, not the collapse of everything I thought was real. "It is not what you think," he started, and I actually let out a short, broken laugh because I had heard that exact sentence too many times already today. "Then tell me what it is," I said, stepping outside now, forcing him to either stand his ground or back away. He did not move. That calm again. It made everything worse. "I was there," he admitted. "But you need to understand how this started." Behind me, Lena's voice cut in, sharper now. "Stop talking," she said. "You are making it worse." Daniel glanced past me toward her, and something passed between them in that look. Something practiced, something familiar, and that was when it hit me in a way none of the messages had. This was not chaos to them. This was something they had already lived through together. I turned slightly, finally looking back at Lena, and the expression on her face was not fear anymore. It was anger again. But underneath it there was something else now, something almost exposed. "You said it was just Evan," I said, my voice tightening. "Then it was my dad. Then my boss somehow fits into this, and now him?" I gestured toward Daniel, and the word felt like it barely contained what I was trying to say. "How many people are we talking about, Lena?" She did not answer directly. Instead, she looked at me with this cold, steady gaze and said, "You are focusing on the wrong thing again." That phrase again. Wrong question. Wrong focus. Like the truth itself was something she could keep just out of reach if she kept shifting where I looked. Daniel stepped forward slightly then, lowering his voice. "Michael, there is a reason all of this is connected," he said. "It did not just happen randomly. It started with one decision, and everything else came from that." My chest tightened again, because I could feel it coming. Another layer, another piece that was going to make everything before it looked smaller. "What decision?" I asked. He hesitated, just for a second, then said quietly, "The night you almost found out the first time. None of this was supposed to continue after that." My mind went completely blank, because I did not remember almost finding out. And the way Lena's face changed when he said that told me there was something I had missed a long time ago. Something that might have started all of this long before I ever noticed anything was wrong.